your toddler is upset, maybe they're scared of the dark, worried about you leaving, or crying because something feels overwhelming, your instinct is immediate and loving. You say you're okay, don't worry, there's nothing to be scared of, I promise everything is fine. You say it gently, you say it repeatedly, you mean every word. But neuroscience shows that this specific comfort habit, the one most parents rely on most often, can actually teach the developing brain that anxiety requires constant external reassurance to be manageable. And over time, this pattern can create more anxiety, not less. If you find yourself repeatedly reassuring your toddler throughout the day, or if you've noticed that the more you reassure them, the more anxious they seem to become, this video will help you understand what's happening in their brain and what developmental psychology suggests we do instead. You are doing nothing wrong by offering reassurance. This is what caring parents do. This is what feels natural and loving when your child is distressed. Reassurance is culturally normalized. It's what most of us received as children. It's what parenting advice often recommends. The intention behind it is beautiful. You want your child to feel safe. You want to ease their worry. You want them to know everything will be okay. These are all expressions of love, but the toddler brain processes reassurance differently than we expect. And understanding that difference allows us to offer comfort in ways that actually build emotional security rather than accidentally undermining it. The reason these early years matter so profoundly for this particular pattern is because this is when the brain is learning its foundational responses to uncertainty and distress. Between ages 0 and 3, your child's nervous system is forming the basic templates that will determine how they handle anxiety, whether they trust their own capacity to manage discomfort, and whether they look primarily inward or outward for emotional regulation. The neural pathways being built right now will shape how they respond to worry, fear, and uncertainty for years to come. Research in developmental neuroscience shows that emotional security in young children doesn't come primarily from being told that everything is okay. It comes from experiencing a calm, regulated adult presence during moments when things feel not okay. This is a critical distinction. The toddler brain is not yet capable of rational reassurance processing. Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that could evaluate your words and logically conclude that they're safe, is years away from being fully developed. What they have instead is a limbic system, the emotional brain, and a nervous system that reads your energy, your tone, your physical presence, and uses that information to determine whether the current moment is actually safe or whether your words are trying to convince them of something that isn't true. This is why repeated verbal reassurance, while well-intentioned, can paradoxically increase anxiety. When a toddler feels scared and you immediately tell them there's nothing to be scared of, their brain receives conflicting information. Their internal experience is telling them something feels wrong. Your words are telling them nothing is wrong. But if nothing is wrong, why do you keep having to say it? Why is the reassurance necessary? The repetition itself becomes evidence to the developing brain that there must be something to worry about. Otherwise, the adult wouldn't need to work so hard to convince them otherwise. The first way this comfort habit affects the developing brain shows up in how it teaches children to interpret their own internal signals. When a toddler expresses fear or worry, and the parent immediately responds with, "You're okay, there's nothing to worry about, you're fine," the implicit message is that the child's internal experience is wrong or invalid. Parents say these things because they believe they're correcting a misperception. They think they're helping the child see reality more accurately. They want to replace the worried thought with a calm one. But neuroscience shows that this approach teaches the developing brain to distrust its own signals. The child feels anxious. That feeling is real and present in their body. When you tell them they're fine and there's nothing to worry about, you're essentially telling them that what they're experiencing internally is incorrect. Over time, this creates a pattern where the child learns to override or dismiss their own emotional information in favor of external input. They stop trusting their internal compass and become dependent on others to tell them how they should feel. Developmental psychology finds that children who receive frequent reassurance often become more anxious over time because they've learned that their own assessment of situations cannot be trusted. They constantly check with adults. They ask the same questions repeatedly. They need someone else to confirm that things are okay because their brain has been trained to doubt its own perception. This looks like reassurance-seeking behavior, and it often escalates because no amount of reassurance actually resolves the core issue, which is that the child has learned not to trust themselves. The long-term effect is an individual who struggles with decision-making, who experiences chronic self-doubt, who feels unable to tolerate uncertainty without external validation, and who may develop significant anxiety because they've never learned to trust their own capacity to assess and navigate situations. The reassurance creates dependency rather than confidence. What to do instead is acknowledge the feeling without dismissing it. When your toddler says they're scared, you can say something simple like, "You're feeling scared right now," or "I hear that this feels scary to you." You're validating their internal experience as real and legitimate. You're not agreeing that there's objective danger. You're confirming that their feeling exists and is acceptable. Then you offer your calm presence. You sit nearby. Your body language is relaxed. Your breathing is steady. You're showing them through your regulated nervous system that you are not worried, which their brain reads as a safety signal. But you're not telling them they shouldn't feel what they feel. This teaches them to trust their internal signals, while also learning that feelings don't always require action or alarm. The second pattern appears in how repeated reassurance teaches the brain that anxiety is something that must be immediately eliminated, rather than something that can be tolerated and will pass naturally. When a toddler shows signs of worry and the parent immediately jumps in with reassuring words, the message the child receives is that this feeling is so problematic it requires urgent intervention. The speed and intensity of the reassurance communicates that anxiety is dangerous and must be stopped right away. Parents do this because they cannot bear to see their child in distress. Every protective instinct says to make the discomfort stop as quickly as possible. They think they're preventing their child from suffering unnecessarily. They believe that if they can just say the right thing, they can make the anxiety go away. But research in anxiety development shows that this approach actually increases anxiety over time because it reinforces the idea that anxious feelings are intolerable and require immediate external management. The child's brain learns that when they feel worried, they cannot sit with that feeling. They must get someone to make it go away. This creates a pattern where any emergence of anxiety triggers an urgent need for reassurance, which then requires more reassurance because the underlying feeling was never allowed to run its natural course and resolve on its own. Neuroscience finds that resilience to anxiety develops specifically through the experience of feeling anxious and then naturally returning to calm without needing to immediately escape or eliminate the feeling. When we interrupt this process with urgent reassurance, we prevent the brain from building the neural pathways associated with distress tolerance. The child never learns that anxiety has a natural arc, that it rises and falls on its own, that they have the capacity to experience worry without being destroyed by it. The hidden long-term effect is someone who becomes increasingly intolerant of any anxious feelings, who experiences panic at the first sign of worry because they've never learned that these feelings are temporary and manageable, and who develops more severe anxiety over time because their window of tolerance has actually narrowed rather than expanded. The reassurance meant to help has accidentally taught them that anxiety is an emergency. What to do instead is allow some space for the feeling to exist before you respond. When your toddler expresses worry, you pause. You take a breath. You might say something very simple like, "I'm here with you," without immediately trying to talk them out of the feeling. You stay physically close with calm energy. You let them feel the anxiety for a moment while you remain steady beside them. What you're teaching is that worry can exist, that it's not dangerous, that they can experience it without needing someone to make it disappear immediately. Over time, through repetition of this experience, their brain learns that anxiety is just a feeling, that it passes, and that they have the capacity to be with it until it does. The third impact of excessive reassurance shows up in how it prevents the development of independent emotional processing. When a toddler begins to show distress and the parent immediately floods them with reassuring statements, explanations, and promises, the child's developing brain never gets the opportunity to process the emotion internally. The external input becomes a substitute for internal processing. Parents rely heavily on words during distress because it feels productive. It feels like teaching. It feels like we're helping the child understand and therefore manage their feelings. We say things like, "You don't need to worry because we'll be right back," or "There's no reason to be scared because the dog is friendly," or "Everything will be fine, I promise, you're completely safe." We think we're providing cognitive tools for managing anxiety, but developmental psychology shows that toddlers do not yet have the cognitive capacity to use reasoning to manage emotion. Their emotional brain is far more developed than their thinking brain. When we talk extensively during their distress, we're asking them to engage cognitive processing during emotional overwhelm, which their brain cannot do effectively yet. More importantly, we're preventing them from developing their own internal narrative about their feelings. We're doing the emotional work for them instead of allowing them to practice doing it themselves with support. Neuroscience finds that emotional intelligence and self-regulation develop through internal processing that happens when the child has space to notice their feelings, sit with them briefly, and observe them shifting over time. When we constantly narrate, explain, and reassure, we occupy the mental space where that internal processing would occur. The child becomes dependent on external interpretation of their emotional experience rather than developing their own capacity to understand and navigate their feelings from the inside. The long-term effect is an individual who struggles to know what they actually feel unless someone
tells them, who has difficulty sitting with emotional discomfort because they never learned to process it internally, and who remains dependent on others for emotional interpretation and management well into adulthood. They never developed the neural pathways for independent emotional processing because those pathways require practice that repeated reassurance inadvertently prevents. What to do instead is offer far fewer words and much more presence during emotional distress. When your toddler is worried or upset, resist the urge to immediately explain or reassure. Sit near them quietly. Your calm body language does more than your words ever could. If you speak at all, keep it minimal. "I'm here," or "I see you're worried," is enough. Then you wait. You give their brain space to notice the feeling, to experience it, to observe it shifting. You're not abandoning them. You're witnessing them. You're providing the safety of your presence while allowing them the dignity of their own internal experience. This is what builds genuine emotional capacity. The fourth way excessive reassurance affects development is in what it teaches about the nature of safety itself. When parents constantly tell their toddler, "You're safe, everything's okay, there's nothing to worry about," the repetition itself undermines the message. The child's brain begins to learn that safety is something that must be verbally confirmed again and again, which implies that without the confirmation, safety is uncertain. Parents do this because they genuinely want their child to feel secure. They think that repeatedly stating safety will help the child internalize that feeling. They believe they're building confidence by consistently reinforcing that the world is safe and they are protected. But research in attachment and developmental neuroscience shows that felt safety, the kind that actually reduces anxiety and builds security, does not come from being told you are safe. It comes from experiencing a regulated, calm presence during uncertain moments. The toddler's nervous system assesses safety primarily through neuroception, a subconscious process that reads the caregiver's nervous system state. When your nervous system is calm, when your body is relaxed, when your breathing is slow and your voice is steady, your child's nervous system receives the message that there is no threat. This communication happens beneath words and is far more powerful than any verbal reassurance. Neuroscience finds that children who are constantly told they're safe, but whose parents seem anxious, rushed, or uncertain in their body language and tone, often develop more anxiety than children who receive fewer words but more genuine calm presence. The child's nervous system trusts the nonverbal signals over the verbal content. When those signals don't match, when you say everything is fine but your energy suggests otherwise, the brain learns that verbal reassurance cannot be trusted and that safety is actually more fragile than you're claiming. The hidden long-term effect is chronic anxiety rooted in the uncertainty about whether safety can be trusted. These individuals often struggle with constant hypervigilance, checking and rechecking, needing repeated confirmation about basic safety, and experiencing significant distress around uncertainty. The excessive reassurance in childhood accidentally taught them that safety is conditional and must be continually verified rather than a baseline state they can trust. What to do instead is focus on regulating your own nervous system first and letting that regulation speak louder than your words. When your toddler expresses fear or worry, notice your own internal state. Take a breath, soften your shoulders, slow your speech. Your calm body tells them more about actual safety than any promise could. You might say something once, very simply, like "I'm here," and then you stop talking. You stay present with steady, grounded energy. You're teaching them that safety is something felt in the body and read in relationship, not something that requires constant verbal confirmation. This builds genuine security. Here's how emotional security and resilience to anxiety actually develop in the young brain. It's not through being told repeatedly that everything is okay. It's not through having every worry immediately dismissed or explained away. It's through the repeated experience of feeling uncertain or anxious, while a calm, steady adult stays present without urgency or alarm. It's through learning that feelings, even uncomfortable ones, are temporary and tolerable. It's through practicing internal emotional processing with the safety net of a regulated caregiver nearby. It's through the nervous system learning through direct experience, not through words, that worry does not equal danger, and that the child has the capacity to move through uncomfortable feelings and come out the other side. This learning happens through repetition of experience, not through perfection of technique. You will still offer reassurance sometimes. You will still say you're okay in moments of distress. Every parent does. What matters is the overall pattern. What matters is that more often than not, you're offering presence over explanations, calm energy over urgent words, space for feeling over immediate elimination of discomfort. The timing of your response matters more than the content. A brief pause before you speak allows the child's brain to begin its own processing. Staying physically close while saying less gives their nervous system access to your calm without overwhelming them with verbal input. This isn't about withholding comfort. It's about offering the kind of comfort that actually builds internal capacity rather than external dependency. Your instinct to comfort your anxious toddler is not wrong. Your desire to ease their worry comes from deep love and care. But understanding how the developing brain actually learns to manage anxiety allows us to comfort in ways that build genuine security rather than accidentally creating more need for reassurance. Your child doesn't need you to convince them they're safe through repeated verbal promises. They need to feel safety through your regulated presence. They need space to experience their own feelings with you nearby. They need to learn that worry worry is just a feeling, not an emergency, and that they have the capacity to be with it until it passes. This is not about being less responsive. This is about being responsive in ways that match how the toddler brain actually develops emotional regulation. It's about understanding that your calm body teaches more than your reassuring words, that your steady presence matters more than your explanations, that allowing space for feeling builds more security than immediately trying to eliminate discomfort. You will not do this perfectly. You will offer too much reassurance sometimes. You will try to talk your child out of worry when presence would serve them better. Every parent does. What matters is that you understand the pattern and move gradually toward offering more presence and fewer words, more calm and less urgent reassurance, more space for feeling and less immediate rescue from discomfort. If this changes how you think about comforting your anxious toddler, consider sharing it with another parent who might be noticing the same pattern. And stay here for more calm science-based guidance on supporting your child's developing brain in ways that build genuine emotional health and resilience.